Hello, everyone. Welcome to My Hero 360. We are a story sharing platform dedicated to sharing the stories of unsung heroes from around the world. Together, we can empower each other and improve quality of life one story at a time. My name is Jill, and today we have a truly special episode lined up. We're diving in to the incredible journey of a remarkable individual whose story is nothing short of inspiring. Today, I have the immense pleasure of welcoming Stephanie Renberg to the platform. Stephanie, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm thrilled to have the chance to talk with you and share your story with our audience. It's truly an honor. To kick things off, could you please just introduce yourself to our listeners? Tell us a little bit about your background.
Sure, thanks. That was quite the introduction. Like, whew, okay. Hi. Like you said, I'm Stephanie Renberg. I am a partially blind digital creator, content creator, whatever you would like to call that, on social media. I educate and spread awareness about blindness and disabilities in general. And then in my own life, I'm kind of currently pursuing dreams of being like an actress and then also of singing. So that's my life wrapped up. I guess I'll say I have a rare genetic disorder called Stargardt disease. So that is my form of blindness.
Awesome, thank you. So let's just jump right in then. You kind of already leaned into that. So you've built a powerful personal brand on social media using your platform to educate about blindness and raise awareness about disabilities. So what inspired you to start this journey?
So I kind of like accidentally fell into it, to
Hmm.
be honest. So from a young age, have really liked performing. So I started performing in musicals and plays when I was only about 8 or 9.
Oh,
I was
wow.
actually living in Turkey at the time. So like,
Wow.
yeah, it was, my dad was in the military. So
Wow.
we were living in the capital of Turkey and I started doing theater. And that's actually right when I started losing my vision, coincidentally. But growing up, we didn't really live in a place that was conducive for acting or for singing. I never grew up in Los Angeles or New York City, stuff like that. So then when I was in college, I kind of linked up with this music producer, and he really turned me on to the idea of social media and how important it was to create your brand and build up your following on there. So I started my pages, and they weren't really about anything at first because I myself wasn't really on social media.
Sure.
Uh, I mean, like, when I was in middle school, high school, I was on Facebook because that's about when Facebook became a thing, became popular. But I had my own Instagram, like a personal account. I didn't even have a TikTok, but I started posting and it was just literally photos of me and like what I'm doing in my life. Like basically what like a personal social media would look like. And I was just doing that because I didn't know what I was doing. And I, was spending every single day watching YouTube videos on how to grow channels, like, what you should do, what your niche should be, kind of things like that. And one day I kind of just decided, oh, it might be fun if I do a little video on how I use my iPhone as somebody who's visually impaired. So I did that video and it got like 5 times as much engagement as anything else I had ever posted. So obviously, people were very interested, which makes sense because, people don't really know about assistive technology. How many people own an iPhone and actually know all of the accessibility functionality built into the phone? Like
I
nobody.
certainly
Like,
don't. Yeah.
yeah, unless you like have to actually use it yourself. So I started making more content like that. It didn't immediately become everything I was posting about, but slowly over time, I was just posting more and more content about blindness because it was so niche, it was so unique that people really found interest in it. And that's when my platforms really took off. And so for the past couple of years, I've primarily focused on blindness education and disability awareness. And only now am I starting to branch out into more like blogging and doing things about like, other trending topics like makeup and fashion and things like that. So I'm branching out a little bit now that I like know what I'm doing. I
Yeah.
certainly didn't know what I was doing for years, but that's how the journey began and I guess where it is now.
Well, it's evident that your work certainly paid off. I've done quite a bit of research on you. And let me just say, like, the content you create certainly stands out. Your sense of
Oh,
humor
yeah.
shines through. And I love how you turn your experiences as like a low vision person into something both funny, like and entertaining, while keeping it also educational. It's evident that
Yeah.
like your unique perspective and approach have resonated with many people. With that in mind, I'd love to hear more about how you've navigated the changes in your vision over time. How did you navigate that?
Yeah, that's really difficult, honestly. I didn't have a lot of help.
Oh,
My family, like some people who have, especially genetic disorders, like multiple people in their family, and even for multiple generations, have had visual impairments. And
right.
for me, it was just totally brand new to my family.
Mm,
Like, absolutely, it's a recessive gene.
mm,
It's very rare that both parents have it. And then, even though both of my parents have it, there was still only a 25% chance that I would have the gene become like active, like
right.
actually, you know, appear. So my family didn't really do much. They didn't know what to do with me. I'm like we have a very like strong academic background in my family. So it actually almost made it like harder for people to tell that I didn't know what I was doing because I was very good at pulling it off. I knew what was going on,
Yeah, yeah,
even though I didn't. So I mean, navigating the vision loss, you have when you're in school, you have vision specialists assigned to you. So they provide you with assistive technology. And I just very slowly, for many years, I was just working with what I was given.
sure.
Uh, and then only by the end of high school and in college did I get to the point where like what I was given wasn't enough and I had to start really looking outward and figuring stuff out for myself. And then honestly, eventually getting on TikTok, and TikTok has their own little, I don't know, pieces of TikTok, which ours is blind talk. So,
Sure. Yeah.
like makeup talk, fashion talk, whatever. Ours is blind talk. I learned a lot from that,
Mhm.
which I could talk about more later on. But that was actually very like eye-opening. But I'm still working on it because progressive vision loss is so difficult in that it's not just like one and done. So many people overnight, they get a different, they're just like they can see and then they can't see. And for me, it was like, okay, I can see, but I can't see the board. I can see, but now I can't see the board and I can't see what I'm reading. So now I need handheld magnifiers. Okay, now handheld magnifiers aren't strong enough. I need an electronic magnifier. Okay, and now I've kind of gotten to the point where I do use screen magnification, but it's too much for me to read with my own eyes. That's just too slow and absolutely way too draining. It's just not feasible. So now when I read things, I pretty much always listen, unless it's just like a few words. I'm always listening to things. So I'm just kind of like upgrading. I like to call it
Sure.
like the evolution of blindness, evolution of
Interesting.
like my
Yeah.
assistive technology. So it's still evolving and I kind of have to figure out for myself when I want to like level up. It's kind of a personal decision. It's hard to not be stubborn because it's difficult to like learn a whole new form of technology.
Sure. It seems like it's constantly evolving and that's kind of hard to keep up with, I can imagine. And it's
Yeah.
one thing to, lose your vision. It's a whole nother thing when you don't have like that support that you needed to go
Yeah.
through that. But like you said, social media, I think has been so much help to so many to help garner support for people going through an experience like such as yourself. So since building your personal brand, what are some common misconceptions about blindness and visual impairments that you encounter, and how do you address them through your advocacy and daily interactions?
I really try to you know, get people to understand the myths and the misconceptions. There's so many. I
Mhm.
mean, there's pretty much only misconceptions about blindness, I would have to say, because how much does the average person know about blindness? Literally nothing.
Yeah.
Like literally nothing. I'd say one big misconception is people have no idea what legally blind means.
Mhm.
I think most people think so. In blindness, you have a lot of different terms because blindness, here's our key phrase, blindness is a spectrum.
Mhm.
And that spectrum starts at legally blind, which is 2200, and then goes just down the line. I'm like around 2800, something like that. And I mean, I could explain what that means, but I won't. But anyway, so legally blind means that you have 2200 vision or worse with glasses with
Oh,
corrective lenses. And so that's the biggest misconception there. Everyone's like, oh my gosh, yeah, I'm actually legally blind without my glasses. And you're just sitting there like, that's literally not that's not what
you're like,
that's not
actually, that's not what that means.
yeah. You're like, no, if your vision is correctable with glasses, then you're not legally blind. So
Right,
and then when you say you're visually impaired, people think that just means you need glasses. When you say you're legally blind, people just think that means glasses. People literally don't know there is a difference between
sure.
being able to have glasses and being completely blind. Like nobody understands there is a spectrum. So I like what's so difficult for blind people is we go out in public and when it comes to just like everyday interactions or even interactions with people working in stores, because they don't understand this, they will well, one, some people really get angry. They think you're lying to them or something. I don't know why they're in your business anyway, but
Right.
they'll be like, what are you talking about? Like, just get glasses. Like, what is wrong with you? Or like I have a friend on social media who he recently was turned away from a restaurant with his guide dog, and he is actually much closer to fully blind than I am. He has retinitis pigmentosa. But with retinitis pigmentosa, you still have a tiny bit of vision in the middle, which is your central vision, which is what you use to look at things. So he
Sure.
was literally turned away from a restaurant because the guy thought he was lying about being blind just because he was able to look in the direction of the person. He was like, how are you looking at me right now? You're totally lying. Like, get out of the restaurant.
That's
So,
crazy.
yeah, yeah. And yeah, unfortunately, that's kind of like what happens with
Right.
disabilities recently. Like Disney World and Disneyland just made huge alterations to their program for people with disabilities because so many
Yeah.
people are lying about being disabled that too many people were using the program that shouldn't be using the program. And so now disabled people who are actually disabled don't get to use the program. So I try to make video. In the beginning, I made a lot of videos that were like, 3 myths about blindness, and it was a lot of blindness as a spectrum oriented. Um, what are some other ones? Big misconceptions. There's kind of It's like weird misconceptions. There's a big misconception with all disabilities that we're just lazy, which makes me laugh because I'm like, the definition of being disabled is that like we have difficulty performing tasks. So by definition, we have to work harder than
Mhm.
the average person to get the same thing done. So I don't really know why people think that's lazy. Like, do you think because it takes me longer that I'm like lazy? Like,
Right. But they're not
no.
seeing it from your perspective, right? They're just seeing it
Yeah,
from their own perspective. And like,
right.
and I think it's like one of those things too, where it's like if you're not in it, you don't even understand it. Like,
Yeah,
so people are just looking from the outside in versus,
yeah,
putting themselves in your shoes and trying to understand how that might feel or be like. Um,
yeah.
but
Very
yeah,
limited like self-awareness on their
yes,
end.
yes, that's what I was trying to get at. Yes, that's
Yeah.
the word. Um,
Um, So laziness, and then unfortunately also just like stupidity or lack of intelligence is a big
mhm.
stereotype. Um, and oh, okay, one big other stereotype will be my last one is that all blind people use a white cane or a guide dog. And the statistic in the US is only between 3 and 8% of people in the blind community use a white cane
Oh,
or a guide dog.
wow.
It's very low.
Yeah,
Um,
I didn't know
and
that.
yeah, it's really low. Less than 10% of us use a white cane or a guide dog. And that is because blindness is a spectrum. And an
Sure.
additional statistic is that over 90% of people in the blind community, and again, that's people who have legally blind or worse, 2200 with glasses or worse. 90% of us, over 90% of us still can see something.
Hmm.
So almost every single person who is considered legally medically blind still has some vision.
Right. So moving forward, your Instagram segment, Things That School Made Me Do, Even Though I'm Blind, sheds a light on the shortcomings in the education system for students with low vision. Can you share your personal experiences navigating school as a low vision student and discuss the critical changes you believe are necessary in the education system to better support students with low vision?
Sure. Well, first, I kind of want to just point out that the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, which is basically the only legal precedence that allows disabled people to function in society right now, That was established in 1990. Like
It's not too long ago.
that is not long ago. We
Yes.
we all know people who were born before 1990.
Yes.
Um, so before I go on about everything that's wrong with the education system, let's just point out the fact that disabled people have not been able to be in society and in school for that long.
Mhm.
Like, sure, I know people back then were accommodated, but a lot of times, and I've talked to obviously like a lot of blind and low vision people of all ages. A lot of times, unfortunately, it has to do with where you live. So if you live in a uh, for example, I did most of my education in Northern Virginia, and Northern Virginia has some of like the wealthiest counties in all of the United States.
Oh,
So what
wow.
I was experiencing was, pretty high end in
Hmm.
terms of what people with disabilities in general experience. And I have talked to people who live in, well, not where I lived, and they just, they did not have the same experience. So it really depends where you live. Kind of like I would assume, how much of your county's taxes are going towards your school programs, things like that. So mine wasn't horrible, but there's obviously things that need to be done. I feel like for one, the biggest thing I would like for all kids to know is that they have a choice when it comes to their accommodations. I was like literally never told that. I didn't figure that out until college. I just thought whatever they told me I was going to get, I was going to get. And that's it. And I have to tell a lot of kids that that's not the case.
Hmm.
Also, students they're kids and they don't understand the law yet, and they don't understand the Americans with Disabilities Act. I have one girl I talk to a lot who's they're middle school or I think she's in high school by now. Um, and she has kids like peeling off the braille that's like labeling
Yeah.
classroom numbers
Hmm.
for her because kids just don't really know better. And if they do, they're just being
Right.
not nice. And I had to point out to her, I'm like, well, it's your school's obligation, legal obligation to put the braille back up immediately. They need to have an accessible space for you. And she had no idea that was even the law. She just thought, she just wasn't doing anything about it. And she has very low vision. She uses a white cane. So she actually, like for me, when I was in school, I could still see the numbers for the most part
Sure.
if I was right next to it, but she can't. So she was literally going off of Braille. And I think she said she's walked into wrong classrooms before and things. And so I'm like, nope, that's your school's job. Like they need to make
Yeah.
things accessible for you. And
Absolutely.
unfortunately, like kids don't understand the law yet. And a lot of times their parents are kind of clueless and don't help their kids. So when I talk to parents, I'm like, you need to understand the ADA. You need to teach your kids their rights because unfortunately, when you're disabled, if you don't advocate for yourself and you don't fight for your rights, you just don't get anything, period.
And
I
that's,
have
yeah.
yeah, I've had more than one visually impaired or disabled person tell me that when they were in school, if they showed up to class and their teacher didn't accommodate them, as in they didn't give them the supplies they needed, like the materials in large print or in electronic format, they just sit back and do nothing the entire class. And that was like their schooling. They just did nothing. They literally just sat there for most of their classes because they were like, oh, if my teacher's not going to do it, then I'm just going to sit here. And that wasn't me. I'm a very thick-headed person. Like I'm a very like independent kind of person. So I would every single class have to go up to my teacher while class is starting. Hey, did you send this to me yet? Hey, did you send this to me yet? Hey, did you send this to
Right.
me yet?
Mhm.
That's what I had to do every single day just to get an education. Uh,
Wow.
and I totally understand these other kids who didn't do that because I'm like, well, you're just doing what everybody else is doing. All
Sure.
the other
Mhm.
kids have to do is show up and sit down.
Yeah.
Like that's
Yeah. Absolutely.
that's again like why it makes me so laugh so much when they're talking about the stereotype of like disabled people being lazy. I'm like, what'd you have to do in school? You just sat there and everything was handed to you. Like I had to fight every single day just to get my classwork, my quizzes, my tests. When I got to the university level, I had to almost bring it to a legal place of suing my school because I had professors just refuse to accommodate me. They'd sign off on my accommodations on the first day of class like they were supposed to.
Right.
Then they just ignore my emails. They wouldn't send me any notes, anything. And so, like, one day I just compiled about 5 pages worth of emails showing, hey, I've reached out to my teachers, I've reached out to their supervisors, I've reached out to the Services for Students with Disabilities department, and I'm still not, I'm like not even getting class materials. How am I supposed to take tests when I'm not even given the notes that everybody else is getting? And then things really turned around because basically I handed their civil rights and equity department 5 pages of proof that I could very easily sue and win. Because at university, I mean, you're paying like all this money
Of
for them to
course, of
educate you,
course.
and then you don't even get taught. So it's really just understanding your rights, understanding you have,
Yeah.
choices with your accommodations, and that's kind of the big points for me, I think.
Yeah. It's definitely eye-opening, hearing about specific challenges like you faced and how you and how you navigated through them. As
Mhm.
I do these interviews, sharing people's stories who are going through a similar experience, such as yourself, I'm learning that the emotional landscape is winding. So how have you navigated the range of emotions that come with living with Stargardt's disease? Were there any certain coping mechanisms, activities, or people that supported you in navigating the journey to where you are now?
Well, like in the beginning, I just really didn't talk about it. I feel like the denial, I definitely feel like having a disability is exactly the same as going through the stages of grief and loss because you literally lose something. You lose a piece of yourself, no matter what your
Sure.
disability is. You're literally losing a piece of yourself. For me, it was my eyesight.
Mhm.
And so, the first stage in that is denial. And I think that for me, it wasn't completely like I was actively trying to be in denial. It's the fact that I was 9 and I had no idea what was going on.
Yeah,
Like,
right.
um, but I mean, there was a lot of little steps and there were people who helped. I would say as soon as I got into high school, I made this one friend who also had disabilities, but she was a very like invisible disability kind of person. So um, it just wasn't quite as obvious for her, but she just, had a very good understanding of what it was like. And I had to say she was like the first person to ever act like my disability was normal. Everybody else always acted very standoffish, like because disabilities are taboo in society.
Right.
Like everybody just gets extremely uncomfortable because nobody knows anything about them. So most people, when they don't know about something, they get shy. Some people actually get angry. People get awkward rather than being like intrigued and like wanting to learn
Yeah.
more. Unfortunately, that's not how most people react to not knowing something. So she treated me normally. I also got a vision specialist when I was in high school who was amazing because she was young. She was like how old I am now when I was in high school. And she had a mother who was visually impaired. So she had grown up with someone in her household that was visually impaired. So it was completely normal to her. Like this has literally been her life. And she was another person that kind of treated me like it was normal. I became comfortable starting to joke about my disability because there's a lot of funny things you can say about being disabled. It's like my life is a comedy.
Mhm.
So I started making like little jokes here and there, and that was a big game changer for me because I was like, oh wow, this is the first time in my life that I talk about my disability, and there's such a positive response from
Mhm.
people. Like always in my life, there had been a negative response, and then I kind of found people where it was a neutral response, like it was no big deal. And then finally I found a way where it was like a positive response. And then I would say that was like, near the end of high school for me. And in college, I definitely hit some low points because I had such difficulty getting accommodated in college. It was a lot. But then leaving college, going into work, that was actually even harder. So fast
Yeah.
forwarding past all of that, honestly, getting on social media was very helpful to me because blind talk is very happening, I would say. There's a lot of blind people on blind talk.
Yes, there is.
Yeah. And when you have a disability, especially something as rare as like what I have, like you never meet another living soul with what you have.
Right.
And social media is the only way that blind people have been able to meet other blind people.
Hmm.
There are like such things as like support groups and whatnot, but I had gone to a few support groups, and most like it wasn't any young people. It was mostly just people who were of retirement age, who had only lost their vision, in retirement age.
Right, right.
So it wasn't like the most helpful,
Mhm.
how there's not too much you can like bond over with that. So getting on Blind Talk was like huge for me. I heard all these stories from people that were like, oh my gosh, I've literally been through that. And it's the first time in my life I had heard of anyone else going through that. I mean, it's very easy to just think you're completely alone when you've never interacted with another person who's actually experienced what you've experienced.
Of
So,
course. I can
mhm.
only imagine.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, and
So,
it's
yay, social media.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And speaking of that, my hero, we are all about recognizing those that have embraced life's challenges and turn it into something powerful and hopeful for others. So can you share ways in which you have not let your own obstacles define you? And what advice would you give to others going through a similar experience?
There's just so many obstacles when you're blind. I feel like for me, what I had to just get used to and to like tell myself, I feel like the hardest obstacle when you're blind or disabled is actually when you can't do the simplest of tasks.
Mm,
Because it's one thing to like, okay, yeah, I can't drive. I'll never be like a pilot, like those more complex things. But it's like when you bought something and you literally can't get to what you bought because you can't figure out how to open the packaging because you can't see it. It's just like things like that like
yeah.
absolutely destroy you. Or if somebody like I love this movie with Anne Hathaway that has her as like someone in her mid-20s having Parkinson's. I believe that's what it's called. And so there's a scene where she just can't open a bottle or she
Mhm.
can't open Pop-Tart, she can't open a bottle, and then like she just breaks down. And so it's like the simplest tasks that like
Yeah,
are really what get to people. And so for me, it just kind of like my biggest advice with those kind of obstacles is that you can't break down with like those little things because it's like everything. You just have to, the hardest thing with being disabled is just to like accept it. I mean, acceptance, like I said with grief, it's the last stage. It takes the longest to get to it. It is very difficult. I definitely suggest going through the different stages that I went through that I talked about. But kind of just when you finally accept, like, yeah, the simplest things. This is going to be what's hard for me. And you just have to like work at it to not break down everything every time something goes wrong. Because I mean, if that were the case, you're going to be breaking down 20 times a day
right.
because it's so hard to just do everything. So I mean, once you like, I just I don't know how to like really recommend acceptance, but that's kind of like
Sure.
it's a lot to work to. Like that's not easy. It's probably going to take you. I mean, there are plenty of people who have been disabled for like a decade and still are not accepting of their disability. It's the hardest thing to let go and understand and accept the fact that you do not have control over this. That's something that most people can't accept over the course of their entire lives, that they don't have
Absolutely.
control over their life. So disabled people, that's why I love disabled people who have like come through that process and have reached
Mhm.
acceptance because they're just like the most enlightened in like beings I've ever met. It's just like,
Mhm.
you know. Um, so I would say, for that, but I guess another recommendation is just you have to put in the effort of looking outward, looking to other people in your community and looking online and looking for apps because assistive technology is just life-saving. I mean, it's really what's going to make the difference for you. I would not be able to do what I do without using the ridiculous number of pieces of assistive
Yeah.
technology that I have.
So for my last question, which I ask every interviewee, what would you tell your younger self knowing what you know now?
Uh, yeah, that's also a difficult one because there's like, I just feel like I'd have to tell myself that like you just need to go through it. There's not really like, I mean, if life were easy, it would be boring. So, I
True.
mean, you're just gonna have to push through it. And I feel like what I'd really want to tell my like younger self is like, one, disabilities are normal.
Mhm.
Society just tries so hard to convince people that it's like they're wrong and they're bad. And I've literally had people comment on my videos saying, hey, it's not okay that you're advocating that there's anything good about disabilities. Like, what? I mean, like that is the extent to which like society has pushed like that
Yeah.
disabilities are bad and they're not normal. And the fact is, even if you aren't disabled now, we come into this world disabled. Like you're not an able-bodied person when you're an infant. And you leave this world disabled. If you live long enough, you will be disabled. Like it is literally inevitable for every single human and animal on this planet to be or have been disabled. Uh, so I'd want to, stress that. The other thing is that I mean, I feel like my mom once kind of tried to tell me like, everybody has something. And I just hated hearing that because I was like, oh yeah, but most people don't have what I have. But like it's true, like the idea, the concept of like there's always someone out there who's having a tougher time than you. And I mean, I guess it's not great to think like, let me just think of who's worse off than me. But like I was just, the point is that everybody's going through something all the time. And
Right.
even though you might be going through something that's really hard, like this is it's just all chance. Life is like a lottery. Life is
Yeah.
a game of chance. And I mean, you should like, I mean, at this point, I'm like thankful for my disability because I mean, like as hard as it is, I don't think I'd be anywhere near like where I am right now if I didn't go through this. I don't think I would be like nearly as good of a person if I didn't go through this. So it sucks a lot. But
Yeah.
I mean, tragedy is what builds character in people. That's just like fact.
I completely agree. I was just gonna say about what your mom said. I think, her point there was just to put things in perspective. I think
Right.
like that was her goal. But
Mhm.
but yeah, what you said was beautiful, and um thank you so much for sharing your journey with us today.
Mhm.
Your authenticity, vulnerability, and unwavering positivity is truly inspiring. And here at My Hero 360, we're deeply moved by the impact you've made through your advocacy. Your story certainly serves as a beacon of hope for many. To our audience, thank you for tuning in. We hope to see you here again next time. If you feel your story will ignite inspiration and positively impact others, go to our website at myhero360.com and submit your story there. Thank you again, Stephanie, for being with us today. It's been an honor.
Yeah, thank you for having me.